Have you ever wondered what it feels like when an empire trembles? Not just a battle lost, not just a few generals slain, but an entire nation paralyzed by a single day. A day so brutal, so precise, so devastating that modern military academies still study it over 2,000 years later. This is not the story of Rome's rise. It's the story of how close it came to falling. In the summer of 216 BC, in a dusty field near the river Aufidus, two civilizations collided. On one side stood the might of Rome, 86,000 strong, a sea of bronze, discipline, and pride. On the other side, a patchwork army from distant lands, held together by one man's vision, Hannibal Barca. He had crossed mountains with elephants. He had won battles against impossible odds. But at Cannae, he would do something no one expected. He wouldn't just defeat Rome, he would trap it, strangle it, leave it gasping for air. In just a few hours, the battlefield would become a graveyard. By nightfall, 70,000 Roman soldiers would lie dead, a generation of sons, fathers, consuls erased. And yet, this is not just a story of loss. It's a lesson in patience, in fear, in resilience. So what really happened on that day? Why did Hannibal not march to Rome? And how did a humiliated republic rise from such despair to become an empire? Let's rewind history. Let's step into the dust, the clash, and the chaos. Of Cannae, long before the fateful clash of swords echoed across the blood-soaked fields of Cannae, a deeper, more insidious war had taken root. A tempest of ambition, expansion, and a thirst for vengeance that would shake the very foundations of the ancient world. Rome and Carthage, two titans of the Mediterranean, were not destined to be foes from the cradle. In their early days, they coexisted, wary but distant, like wary beasts circling the same watering hole. Yet as their empires swelled, their destinies collided. Trade routes, lifelines of gold and grain crisscrossed the seas, while colonies sprouted like weeds, each a claim to power. Influence, that elusive prize, dangled before them, and the Mediterranean became a chessboard where every move risked checkmate. The First Punic War had ended in a bitter Roman triumph, leaving Carthage humbled, stripped of Sicily, its proud naval fleet reduced to splinters, and its coffers bled dry by crushing reparations. But do not mistake defeat for surrender. Carthage, like a wounded lion, turned inward, licking its wounds, rebuilding its wealth, and forging a new weapon, a warrior unlike any other, Hannibal. Raised in the shadow of his father Hamilcar's burning resentment, Hannibal was nursed on the milk of defeat. As a boy, he stood before a flickering altar, his small hand clasped in his father's, swearing an oath to never call Rome friend. That vow, etched into his soul, fueled a fire that would blaze across continents. When the Second Punic War ignited in 218 BC, Hannibal did not wait for Rome to strike. With audacity as his banner, he marched through the wilds of Spain, over the jagged, snow-clad Alps, and into the heart of Italy itself. A daring invasion to bring the war to Rome's doorstep. Across the divide, Rome had forged itself into a machine of war. Year after year, it summoned legions, thousands of men bound by iron discipline, led by consuls who rotated like seasons, all driven by an unshakable creed. The Republic must endure no matter the cost. Their strength was in numbers, tradition, and a pride that bent for no man. And so, the stage was set for a clash of titans. Carthage wielded cunning, flexibility, and the bold strokes of a master strategist. Rome countered with sheer might, the weight of custom, and a resolve as unyielding as its 7 hills. Yet as the two armies faced each other across the dusty plains of Cannae, this was no mere battle for land or blood. It was a duel for survival, of identity, of empire, of the very legacy that would echo through the annals of history. What drove Hannibal to defy the impossible, to lead elephants and men through treacherous peaks? Could Rome's legions withstand the storm of his genius? The answers lie in the dust of Cannae, where fate hung in the balance and the world held its breath. Step closer, listener, and heed this tale, for here begins a saga of rivalry and revenge, a story to grip your heart and demand you hear it to its thunderous end. If victory favors the bold, then Hannibal, the Lion of Carthage, had already seized destiny's favor before a single Roman sword gleamed in the sun. In the sweltering summer of 218 BC, he embarked on a quest that would etch his name into the annals of legend. Not by the predictable paths of the sea, but by a route so audacious, so unthinkable, that it defied the very limits of mortal ambition. His aim, to invade Italy not from the gentle embrace of its coasts, but from above, from the perilous roof of the world itself. From the rugged wilds of Iberia, Hannibal's army marched, a motley force of men and beasts, their eyes set on the impossible. First they breached the Pyrenees, where narrow passes twisted like serpents and hostile tribes struck from the shadows, testing the mettle of every soldier. Undaunted, they pressed on to the Rhone River. Here, Carthaginian engineers, masters of ingenuity, lashed together rafts to ferry towering elephants across the churning waters, beasts of war swaying atop fragile wood, a sight to stir both awe and dread. And then the Alps. These were no mere hills, but frozen fortresses carved by the hands of gods. Thin, treacherous trails clung to sheer cliffs, snowfalls buried men in icy graves, and the biting wind gnawed at flesh with the cruelty of frostbite. Supplies dwindled to crumbs, soldiers plummeted to their doom, and despair whispered in the shadows. Yet Hannibal, the unyielding heart of this storm, never faltered. He strode at the fore, his voice a beacon of fire, inspiring his men with promises of glory beyond the peaks. Battered, bloodied, but blazing with purpose, they emerged into Italy, a force forged in hardship, ready to strike. Rome reeled, caught in the grip of disbelief. They had braced for a naval clash, ships clashing on familiar waves, not this avalanche of foes cascading from the north like a wrathful tide. Hannibal gave them no time to recover. At the Trebia River, he struck, luring the Romans into icy waters, ambushing them as the cold sapped their strength and scattering their ranks in chaos. Months later, by the misty shores of Lake Trasimene, he wove another masterpiece of war. Thick fog cloaked his approach, and a cunning trap swallowed thousands of Romans in a single brutal stroke. Panic surged through Rome's streets like wildfire. This was no ordinary general, no mere mortal bound by the rules of war. This was a ghost in the mountains, a nightmare conjured from the mists, a specter of vengeance haunting their every step. Whispers filled the forums. Who was this man, this Carthaginian wraith, defying nature and Rome alike? How could legions, the pride of the Republic, crumble before his gaze? And yet, dear listener, the worst was still to come. What terrors would this master of war unleash next? What fate awaited Rome as Hannibal's shadow loomed ever closer? Cling to this tale, for the saga of courage and cunning unfolds, demanding you follow to its heart-pounding end. Rome, the eternal city, had tasted defeat before, bitter pills swallowed in the dust of past campaigns. But never like this. Never had the Republic reeled from such a storm of ruin. Two mighty armies lay crushed, their banners trampled in the mud. Northern defenses, once a shield of iron, now lay shattered. And Hannibal, the relentless scourge of Carthage, prowled deep within Italian soil, his shadow lingering like a specter of doom with no sign of retreat. Fear blazed through Rome like wildfire, consuming hearts in city and countryside alike. In their desperation, the Senate turned to Quintus Fabius Maximus, thrusting upon him extraordinary powers as dictator, not to claim victory but to claw for survival. Fabius, a man of grim resolve, crafted a strategy as cautious as it was cunning: avoid the clash of swords. He trailed Hannibal like a patient hunter, severing supply lines, harrying foragers, and striking only from the shadows. They called him the Delayer, a title whispered with both grudging respect and scorn. But Rome, built on valor and glory, was no city to cheer for patience. The citizens branded him coward, their voices rising in anger at his refusal to face the foe head-on. Popularity withered, and as Fabius's term faded, Rome shook off restraint, returning to its true nature, bold, brash, and hungry to end this war. The Senate, aflame with resolve, elected new consuls, among them Gaius Terentius Varro, a firebrand who vowed a decisive triumph to silence the Carthaginian menace. To leave nothing to chance, they forged a colossus of an army. 8 legions, twice the usual might, nearly 90,000 souls, strong citizens, allies, even boys scarcely old enough to grip a spear, all rallied to the cause. Never before had Rome unleashed such a tide of strength upon a single field. Yet this was more than desperation. It was pride, a defiant belief that Roman numbers and unyielding courage could never be bested. The Republic was not mustering for a mere skirmish. It was forging a hammer to crush Hannibal once and for all, to bury his legend in the dust. But war, that cruel arbiter, punishes arrogance with a cold and merciless hand. And Hannibal, the master of guile, was watching, his keen eyes glinting with the promise of a reckoning. What fate awaited this vast Roman host? Would pride lift them to glory or hurl them into the abyss? Lend your ear, brave listener, to this saga of defiance and danger, for the road to Cannae beckons and its end will grip your soul. In the storied halls of ancient Rome, power rested in the hands of 2 consuls, bound by law to rule as one, yet harmony was a rare guest between them. Lucius Aemilius Paulus and Gaius Terentius Varro stood as opposites, 2 sides of Rome's soul clashing like storm and stone. Paulus, the cautious aristocrat, bore the wisdom of experience, his steady gaze tempered by battles past. Varro, a fiery populist, burned with boldness, a man of action who scorned the slow dance of deliberation. Their army, a titan of nearly 90,000 souls, was too vast for one man to wield alone. Roman law, unyielding as marble, decreed they alternate command each day. A tradition forged in peace, but ill-suited to the chaos of war, where law and logic rarely march in step. Paulus, haunted by Hannibal's cunning, urged patience, yearning to choose the ground and moment with care, to wear down the Carthaginian fox. Varro, however, saw hesitation as a poison draining Rome's fierce spirit. With such a host at his back, he dreamed of a swift, crushing blow to end the war in a blaze of glory. And so, on the fateful morning of August 2, 216 BC, destiny turned on Varro's day of command. With unwavering resolve, he led Rome's finest, legions of iron and pride, straight into the jaws of Hannibal's trap. But was the fault truly his alone? Historians have wrestled with this riddle for centuries, their quills scratching out blame amid the ashes of defeat. Varro, branded the scapegoat, bore the weight of a disaster too vast for one man to carry, while Paulus, with no kin left to champion his name, faded into the shadows of memory. Even Polybius, the chronicler close to Paulus's grandson Scipio Aemilianus, may have tilted the tale, weaving a narrative to shield one and damn the other. Yet beyond the fog of blame, a deeper truth burns bright. Rome stood divided, consuls, ideals, and hopes clashing, even as it braced for the deadliest day in its storied history. What drove these men to such discord? Did pride or prudence hold the key to Rome's fate? And what horrors awaited as Hannibal's genius loomed? Step closer, brave listener, and heed this saga of division and doom, for the tale of Cannae beckons, and its echoes will seize your soul until the final, fateful note. Unlike Rome, with its legions forged from the heart of a single proud nation, Hannibal's army was no monolith. It was a breathtaking mosaic, a tapestry of warriors woven from the far-flung corners of a vast, unruly network. Libyans marched from the sun-scorched sands of Africa, Gauls roared from the misty wilds of the north. Iberians strode from the rugged hills of Spain, Numidians galloped from desert wastes, and slingers from the Balearic Islands spun their deadly art. They spoke a cacophony of tongues, clad in mismatched armor, some brandishing curved swords, others clutching oval shields or riding bareback into the fray, a riot of cultures united in defiance. Yet one man bound this chaos into strength. Hannibal was more than a commander, he was a unifier, a lodestar in the storm. With respect as his currency, he honored every soldier, rewarded courage with a steady hand, and charged at the forefront, his cloak billowing amid the dust of battle. His charisma, a flame that warmed all, and his tactical genius, sharp as a blade, won not just obedience but fierce loyalty, not born of homeland, but of a shared burning purpose. Each tribe brought gifts to the fight. The Gauls, towering and untamed, unleashed wild ferocity, hacking through foes like tempests. The Spanish, agile and disciplined, danced through combat with lethal grace. The Numidian cavalry, light as the wind, swift and unpredictable, became Hannibal's eyes and teeth, striking where Rome least expected. Even his elephants, those towering titans of war, though mostly lost by Cannae, had trampled their mark into legend. A thundering symbol of audacity that struck terror into Roman hearts. What welded this band wasn't the soil of a shared birth, but belief in vengeance, a reckoning for Rome's past wrongs, belief in victory no matter how steep the odds. While Rome's soldiers marched in rigid ranks, drilled to uniformity, Hannibal's force flowed like a living beast, adaptable, instinctive, precise. A brotherhood of diversity, forged in trust and tempered by a dream of triumph. And at Cannae, Hannibal would wield this vibrant, deadly fusion like a surgeon's scalpel, poised to carve deep into Rome's vaunted pride. How could such a varied host outwit a titan? What genius lay in Hannibal's plan to turn difference into devastation? Lend your ear, bold listener, to this saga of unity and daring, for the clash at Cannae awaits, and its secrets will grip you to the final, fateful stroke. At first glance, the sweeping plains of Cannae gleamed like a stage set for Rome's triumph. Flat, open ground stretched wide, a perfect arena for their heavy infantry to lock shields and march in unison, their vast numbers a promise of certain victory. The Romans, brimming with confidence, believed sheer might would shatter any foe daring to stand before them. But Hannibal, the master of war, had chosen this field not for Rome's glory, but for their undoing. With a strategist's eye, he studied the land's secrets, the sun, the wind, the very pulse of the earth. He noted the river Aufidus, a sinuous barrier coiling through the plain, hemming in Roman maneuvers. He saw the morning sun, rising to blind their eyes with its golden glare. He felt the dusty wind, ready to whip grit into their faces, a relentless ally to his cause. Then with the precision of a sculptor, Hannibal shaped his army, not in the rigid lines of tradition, but in a daring crescent, a bow of battle bent for brilliance. At the center, slightly thrust forward, he placed his Gauls and Spaniards, fierce but lighter troops, a tempting weakness to lure the Romans in. On the flanks, he anchored his elite Africans, seasoned warriors, silent as shadows, deadly as vipers, poised to strike. His cavalry, led by the cunning Hasdrubal and the swift Maherbal, guarded the wings. Numidians on the right, swift and elusive to harry and harass, Iberians and Gauls on the left, a thunderbolt to crush and shatter. His plan was no mere tactic. It was bold, elegant, a terrifyingly efficient dance of death. Hannibal baited the Romans. As the Romans pressed deeper, drunk on the thrill of advance, the crescent of Hannibal's line curved inward, subtle and sinister. The jaws of the trap began to close. On the flanks, his African veterans, seasoned and steely, stood like statues at first, waiting, watching, holding their ground. Then with timing honed to perfection, they pivoted, crashing into the exposed Roman sides like a tide of vengeance, swords flashing in the blinding sun. Meanwhile, Hannibal's cavalry, led by the relentless Hasdrubal and Maherbal, thundered into the Roman horsemen, scattering them in disarray. But they did not pursue the fleeing riders. Instead, they wheeled behind, a storm of hooves and fury slamming into the Roman rear with devastating force. The trap snapped shut. Rome's mighty army, once a symbol of pride, became a human knot. Packed tight, no room to wield a blade, no path to flee, surrounded and sliced apart from every angle. The historian Polybius, with a pen dipped in horror, told of men crushed by the weight of their own comrades, of desperate soldiers clawing into the dirt, burying their faces to escape the suffocating panic. Nearly 600 Romans fell each minute, a river of blood staining the earth. By sunset, an eerie silence cloaked the field. Over 70,000 Roman and allied warriors lay slain, a carpet of the dead stretching to the horizon. Another 10,000, broken and bound, were seized as captives. Only a tattered few slipped the carnage, among them a young officer, Scipio, his future yet unwritten. This was no mere defeat. It was an execution, a slaughter to haunt Rome's dreams for generations. How could such a titan fall so far? What legacy would rise from this blood-soaked plain? Lend your ear, brave listener, to this saga of carnage and cunning, for the tale of Cannae burns bright, and its echoes will grip your soul to the final, fateful breath. When the grim tidings of Cannae galloped into Rome, the city did not crumble into tears. It froze, stunned into a silence as cold as the grave. 2 consuls, the pillars of the Republic, were gone. Dozens of tribunes, the voices of the people, lay dead. An entire generation of Rome's finest sons, warriors, husbands, fathers, vanished in a single brutal day, their blood soaking the plains of Apulia. The Senate, that hallowed chamber of debate, offered no stirring speeches. The streets, usually alive with clamor, held no public wails. Only silence reigned, heavy and suffocating, laced with a fear that clawed at every heart. Rome had tasted defeat before, centuries past, at the hands of the Gauls, but never a wound this deep. Now, with their mighty army annihilated and Hannibal, the relentless specter, camped within striking reach, the Republic teetered on the brink of collapse. Treachery spread like wildfire. Cities in Apulia and Samnium, once loyal, turned to Hannibal's banner. Sicily, a prized jewel, wavered in its allegiance. Far to the east, Philip V of Macedon, a cunning king, spied opportunity, forging an alliance with Carthage to open a new front, a dagger aimed at Rome's flank. Within the city's walls, superstition gripped the people. They pored over sacred texts, held desperate rituals, and in a chilling echo of ancient dread, buried humans alive, a sacrifice born of a desperation unseen for generations. Yet Rome, battered and bleeding, refused to kneel. They conscripted boys, barely bearded, alongside criminals and slaves, forging a ragtag force from the dregs of despair. Smiths hammered new blades, shields, and spears, the forges blazing through the night. And still, surrender was a word unspoken. Instead, Rome transformed. The arrogance that once swelled its chest melted away, replaced by a cold, unyielding determination. Shunning the reckless charge, the Republic turned back to the cautious ways of Fabius, the delayer stalking Hannibal with patience and guile. Hannibal had dreamed Cannae would break Rome, ending the war in a crimson stroke. But instead, he had forged a new Rome, a city that learned from its scars, adapted to its foe, and endured through sheer, stubborn will. The road ahead stretched long, paved with years of battles and oceans of blood. But Rome, like a phoenix forged in fire, would rise again. And one day it would march, not merely to victory, but to the dawn of an empire. How would this wounded giant claw back from the abyss? What trials awaited in the shadow of Hannibal's triumph? Lend your ear, brave listener, to this saga of ruin and resilience, for the tale of Rome's rebirth burns bright, and its echoes will seize your soul to the final, fateful chapter. It lingers as one of history's grandest enigmas, a tantalizing what-if to stir the mind and haunt the ages. After the most devastating victory Rome ever endured, why did Hannibal, the scourge of the Republic, not storm the eternal city itself? The blood-soaked plains of Cannae lay behind him, a testament to his genius, yet the gates of Rome stood unassailed. Even his own cavalry commander, the fiery Hannibal, reeled in disbelief. "You know how to win, Hannibal," he spat, his words dripping with bitter frustration, "but not how to use victory." Was this hesitation born of doubt, or was it the quiet wisdom of a master strategist? Historians with pens poised over centuries still wrestle with the riddle. Some whisper of exhaustion, Hannibal's army, a weary mosaic of men thousands of miles from Carthage, cut off from fresh troops and supplies, staggered under the weight of their epic march. Others point to logistics. Lacking siege engines, catapults, or battering rams, how could he breach Rome's towering, defiant walls? Politically, perhaps he gambled on a broken Senate, hoping Rome would bow, extend a trembling hand, and sue for peace. But Rome, unyielding, didn't blink. Instead, the Republic dug in, reorganized, and waged a war of attrition, a slow grind Carthage could ill afford. Consider, too, the human toll. Hannibal, a leader of heart as well as mind, had watched his warriors suffer, through jagged mountains, biting winters, and endless clashes. To march on a fortified capital, with food and supplies dwindling, might have shattered his loyal host beyond repair. In the end, his choice bore the mark of reason, a calculated pause, but history, that stern judge, rarely spares a nod to caution. And so the great what-if echoes through time. What if Hannibal had marched? What if Rome, the cradle of an empire, had fallen in 216 BC? Would the world we know, its laws, its roads, its legacy, be but a shadow reshaped by a Carthaginian dawn? Yet Hannibal held back, his boots unplanted before Rome's gates, and Rome, bloodied but unbroken, survived. Why did genius pause at the brink of glory? Could one bold step have rewritten destiny? Lend your ear, brave listener, to this saga of triumph and tantalizing doubt, for the tale of Cannae's aftermath burns bright, and its mysteries will seize your soul to the final, fateful whisper. Cannae was no mere battle, it was a blueprint, a timeless stroke of genius etched in blood upon the plains of 216 BC. Long after the dust settled and the crimson stains faded, generals across the centuries have knelt at its altar, studying Hannibal's masterpiece with awe. From Napoleon's daring campaigns to von Schlieffen's grand designs, from Eisenhower's calculated strikes to Patton's bold charges, military minds have hailed Cannae as the pinnacle of envelopment and annihilation. Even the German Schlieffen plan of World War I echoed its brilliance: lure the enemy in, encircle, and erase them from the field. At West Point, Cannae stands not merely as a lesson, but as a haunting cautionary tale. It lays bare the cost of hubris. When confidence blinds preparation, when sheer numbers scorn strategy, and when one luminous mind, Hannibal's, rewrites the very rules of war. A single day of misjudgment and Rome's might was undone, a warning whispered through the ages to every commander who dares to lead. Yet Cannae transcends tactics, It is a saga of survival. Rome, by all rights, should have crumbled. Its greatest generals lay broken, its allies slipped away like shadows, and Hannibal's specter loomed ever near. But the Republic refused to die, not because it was invincible, but because it clung to life with a tenacity forged in despair. Cannae teaches us that defeat is not the end. Sometimes it's the spark of a new beginning. From the ashes of humiliation, a wounded Rome rose, its spirit tempered